Imagine a country whose most famous symbol was never meant to last forever. Imagine a tower made not of marble, not of stone, not of royal gold, but of exposed iron, cold, industrial, skeletal iron, rising above one of the most elegant cities in the world. At first, many people hated it. They said it was ugly. They said it was useless. They said it would ruin Paris. And yet today, when the world thinks of France, one of the first images that appears is that same iron structure standing above the Seine, glowing at night like a monument made of light. This is the Eiffel Tower, but it is not only the story of a tower. It is the story of a country that has always lived between beauty and revolution, tradition and invention, poetry and engineering, pride and contradiction, because France is not easy to define. It is the country of royal palaces and public uprisings, the country of cathedrals and barricades, the country of philosophers, painters, soldiers, farmers, engineers, writers, and revolutionaries, a country that gave the world the language of elegance, but also the language of revolt. And perhaps that is why its most famous symbol is so strange. The Eiffel Tower is not soft. It is not classical. It does not hide its structure. It shows every beam, every rivet, every curve of iron. It is beautiful because it does not pretend to be anything else. To understand why this tower mattered, we have to return to Paris in the late 19th century, when France was still living with the memory of defeat, revolution, empire, and republic. Only a few decades earlier, Paris had been shaken by war and political violence. The country wanted to show the world that it was not broken. It wanted to prove that France was still a center of art, science, engineering, and modern civilization. And in 1889, Paris would host a great World Exposition. The date was not random. It marked 100 years since the French Revolution of 1789, the event that changed not only France, but the entire political imagination of the modern world. Before that revolution, kings seemed eternal. After it, every throne in Europe understood that the people could become history's most dangerous force. The French Revolution gave the world 3 words that still echo today: liberty, equality, fraternity. But those words were never simple. They were born in hope, but also in blood. They inspired democracy, but also terror. They destroyed an old world, but did not immediately create a peaceful new one. France has spent more than 2 centuries trying to live up to those words. And in 1889, the Republic wanted to celebrate them with a monument unlike anything the world had seen. The idea was bold. Build a tower 300 meters high on the Champ de Mars near the Seine. At that time, such a structure sounded almost impossible. Paris was a city of stone facades, church domes, classical avenues, and carefully designed beauty. The proposed tower would be something entirely different. A giant open lattice of iron, taller than anything humans had built before. The project came from the company of Gustave Eiffel. Eiffel was not a romantic dreamer in the usual sense. He was an engineer. His world was mathematics, wind resistance, metal, weight, pressure, and precision. Before the tower, his company had already worked on bridges, railway structures, and even the internal iron framework of the Statue of Liberty. So when Paris needed a monument for the age of industry, Eiffel and his engineers offered a new kind of beauty. Not the beauty of carved angels, but the beauty of calculation. The tower began not as a national icon, but as an engineering challenge. Every piece had to be designed before it reached the construction site. Thousands of iron parts were prepared, measured, numbered, and fitted with extraordinary precision. On the Champ de Mars, workers assembled them like a giant metal puzzle rising into the sky. The construction site must have looked shocking to Parisians of the time. Iron legs spreading across the ground, cranes, scaffolding, smoke, and the skeleton of the future. And many people were furious. A group of artists and writers protested against the tower before it was even completed. They believed it would humiliate the city. They thought it would dominate Paris like an industrial monster. To them, the tower was not a triumph. It was an insult. It rose above Notre Dame. It rose above the Louvre. It rose above the old skyline of Paris. For a city that had spent centuries perfecting elegance, the Eiffel Tower looked like a machine that had escaped from a factory and planted itself in the heart of beauty. But history often has a sense of irony. The thing people fear as an invasion sometimes becomes the thing they later cannot imagine living without. As the iron structure climbed higher, curiosity began to replace outrage. People watched the tower rise stage by stage. They saw the four legs curve inward with strange mathematical grace. They saw platforms appear in the air. They saw workers moving across beams high above the city, like figures between earth and sky. And slowly, the impossible became visible. By the spring of 1889, the tower was complete. Gustave Eiffel climbed it with officials and journalists before the elevators were fully ready. At the top, the French flag was raised, and Paris could finally look at itself from a height it had never known before. This was not only a new monument, it was a new viewpoint. For the first time, the city of revolutions, churches, palaces, boulevards, and rivers could be seen as one vast living organism. When the 1889 Exposition opened, visitors came from around the world. They came to see machines, inventions, colonial displays, scientific marvels, electric lights, and the promise of a new century approaching. But above everything stood the tower. It was both entrance and announcement. France was saying, "We are still here." Not only as a museum of the past, but as a laboratory of the future. The public loved it. People climbed its stairs, looked down on Paris, and experienced something that had once belonged only to birds, balloons, and imagination. And yet, the Eiffel Tower still had a problem. It was supposed to be temporary. The original permission allowed it to stand for only a limited period. After that, it could have been dismantled. Think about that. The symbol that now seems inseparable from France was once close to being removed like an exhibition pavilion after a fair. Paris could have lost its most famous silhouette before the world had fully learned to love it. So Gustave Eiffel had to save his tower. And he did something very French, but also very modern. He did not only defend it as art, he defended it as usefulness. The tower became a place for scientific experiments. Meteorology, physics, aerodynamics, and later wireless communication all found a home in its iron frame. Its height made it valuable, and that value helped it survive. This is one of the great lessons of the Eiffel Tower. Beauty alone did not save it. Utility saved it first. Then time made it beautiful. At the beginning of the 20th century, the tower's role changed again. As radio technology developed, the Eiffel Tower became more than a tourist attraction. It became an antenna, a communication structure, a tool for messages moving invisibly through the air. The tower that had been called useless became useful in the most modern way possible. It helped transmit information. It helped connect people. It became not only a symbol of height, but a symbol of signal. But France itself was changing. The 20th century would test the country more brutally than anyone at the 1889 Exposition could have imagined. World War I brought trenches, loss, and industrial death on a scale Europe had never seen. The beautiful confidence of the Belle Peuple collapsed into mud, artillery, and mourning. France paid an enormous price. Villages lost generations of young men. Fields became graveyards. Families carried names that would never return home. And above Paris, the tower still stood. Then came World War II. France fell to Nazi Germany in 1940. Paris was occupied. The Eiffel Tower, once a proud symbol of national modernity, now stood over a city under foreign control. There is a famous story that during the occupation, The tower's elevator cables were cut, so if Hitler wanted to reach the top, he would have to climb the stairs. Whether told with pride, humor, or defiance, the story survived because it expressed something deeper than mechanics. France had been occupied, but France had not disappeared. The tower could be photographed by invaders, but not truly possessed by them, because symbols are strange things. An army can stand beneath them, but that does not mean it owns what they mean. After liberation, Paris returned to itself. The Eiffel Tower became again what it had slowly become before the war, a meeting point, a landmark, a postcard, a promise, a memory. But by then, its meaning had changed. It was no longer only a monument of engineering. It was a witness. It had seen the optimism of the 19th century, the trauma of the First World War, the humiliation of occupation, the joy of liberation, the rise of tourism, the age of television, the age of global travel, and the age of the internet. It stood through all of it. Iron, when neglected, rusts. But the Eiffel Tower survived because France kept maintaining it. It had to be painted again and again, checked again and again, repaired again and again, protected from weather, time, and fatigue. And here, the tower offers another lesson. National symbols do not survive because people admire them once. They survive because each generation decides they are still worth caring for. The Eiffel Tower is not eternal by nature. It is made eternal by attention. Every few years, workers climb its iron body, repainting and preserving it, layer after layer, almost like a ritual. In that sense, the tower is not finished. It is always being renewed. And perhaps that is why it represents France so well. Because France itself is a country of renewal. It keeps returning to old questions. What is freedom? Who belongs to the Republic? What does equality mean in real life? How can a country honor its past without becoming trapped by it? How can beauty survive in an industrial world? How can tradition and modernity live in the same city? Paris is the perfect stage for these questions. Walk through the city, and you can see time layered everywhere. Roman stones, medieval churches, royal palaces, revolutionary squares, Napoleonic avenues, iron railway stations, modern glass buildings, immigrant neighborhoods, luxury shops, protest marches, cafes where people still argue as if ideas could change the world. And in the middle of all this stands the tower. It does not erase the past. It rises from it. From the top, Paris is not only romantic, it is complicated. The sun curves through the city like a memory. The Louvre stretches below as a former palace turned museum. Notre Dame reminds the city of faith, fire, and restoration. The Arc de Triomphe remembers war and victory. The boulevards recall both imperial planning and revolutionary crowds. And the Eiffel Tower gathers all of these contradictions into one image. France is old, but not frozen, elegant, but not fragile, proud, but often self-critical, romantic, but deeply irrational, a country of art, but also of engineering. This is why the Eiffel Tower works as a symbol, not because it explains France simply, but because it refuses simplicity. It is both graceful and mechanical, beloved and once hated, temporary and permanent, touristic and scientific, Parisian and global, a monument to the past that still looks like a machine from the future. At night, when the tower lights up, it becomes almost unreal. The iron disappears into gold. The structure that once shocked Paris becomes the city's lantern. People gather beneath it from every country. They take photographs, propose marriage, sit on the grass, eat cheap food from paper bags, or simply stand silently and look up. Most of them are not thinking about the protests of 1887. They are not thinking about rivets, wind resistance, or radio antennas. They are not thinking about the political anxieties of the Third Republic. They are thinking, I am in Paris. That is the final victory of the Eiffel Tower. It turned engineering into emotion. But perhaps the deeper truth is this: France did not become France by avoiding contradiction. It became France by living inside contradiction, arguing with itself, destroying and rebuilding, preserving and inventing, remembering and refusing to stop moving. The Eiffel Tower was once accused of ruining Paris. Instead, it taught the world to see Paris differently. It was once supposed to disappear. Instead, it became unforgettable. It was once a temporary structure for a world exhibition. Instead, it became a permanent question standing above the city. Can a nation remain itself while becoming modern? France has been answering that question for more than a century. Not with a single answer, but with museums and factories, with revolutions and constitutions, with cathedrals and train stations, with cafes and laboratories, with old stones and iron beams, with memory and invention. And above it all, the Iron Lady still stands. She does not look like a queen. She does not look like a fortress. She does not look like a church. She looks like what France became when it decided that even iron could be elegant. If you see her only as a tourist attraction, you miss the point. The Eiffel Tower is not just the symbol of Paris because it is beautiful. It is the symbol of Paris because it survived being misunderstood. And that may be one of the most French stories imaginable. A scandal became a masterpiece. A machine became poetry. A temporary tower became a national soul. And every night, when its lights begin to glow above the Seine, it reminds the world of something simple but powerful. Sometimes the future arrives looking ugly to the present. Sometimes a country does not recognize its own symbol at first. And sometimes the thing built to last only 20 years becomes the thing people cannot imagine losing. That is France, a country that turned revolution into language, iron into elegance, and a tower into a dream. If this story made you see the Eiffel Tower differently, let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about how nations, monuments, and people shape history, don't forget to subscribe. There are still many stories about how human beings change the meaning of the world around them, and we will see you in the next one.